This is a description of, which one is this? Oh, Jacob Lawrence painting, The Migration of the Negro. So I will read the student's description first, the student's first draft description. Jacob Lawrence's The Migration of the Negro is a vertical 18 by 12 inch horizontal painting. Actually, right there, you can't say it's vertical, then it's horizontal. I'll get into that later. Continuing, from looking at the painting, we can see that the artist has not utilized many colors. He uses very neutral colors such as black, brown, and gray, which help to create the setting of the painting. The gray, dull background paints a very somber mood. Also, the images are made up of sharp, straight lines, most of which form rectangles. For example, the bodies, or better yet, the clothing of the people in the painting seem to be made of rectangles or oblong shapes that are rectangle-like that are made from sharp lines. As we continue to look at the picture, it is obvious that as we get closer to the horizon, the images begin to decrease in size. Another thing that is noticed is that the painting is separated into two halves by a golden rope barrier, which oddly enough has the brightest color, gold. In comparing these two halves, we notice that the images on the right are significantly smaller compared to the images on the left in comparison. With that being said, we also notice that the personalities of the African American characters are given by the way their bodies are drawn as compared to the white characters who actually have faces and expressions. Okay, there are a lot of things that need to be refined with that, but there's a lot of content there already in this description. It's a good start. Let's start with a couple things. Let's see, vertical versus horizontal. Let me change. I'm just going to change brush tool. Okay. So vertical is this orientation, and has the dimensions are longer in the vertical than they are in the horizontal. So this is a vertical 18 by 12 inch painting, not a vertical 18 by 12 inch horizontal painting. So right there. Easy correction. A minor thing, but an important one. Or seems like a detail, but it's an important detail. It's not minor, it's a first step. All right, the artist has not used many colors. Let's see, got green, red, black, brown, yellow, gold, whatever color this is, Naples yellow, really. There's some blue. So there are a bunch of colors. I would say, like, you have primary and secondary colors. Primary colors being red, blue, yellow. Secondary colors are violet or purple, orange, and green. There's just not a complex use of colors. The colors are basic, but there are a lot of colors. So nitpicky languaging, but for the sake of accuracy and expanding the description. Images are made up of sharp lines, most of which form rectangles or oblongs. That's true. Got a lot of rectangles or oblong forms, which are drawn better than I can draw with a tablet. The painting itself is a rectangle. Here's what's going to help this a lot. It's really easy to look around at details and just kind of latch onto something and go from there. Let's metaphorically back out, see what shape this is, and that is the vertical painting. And then what's next is most important, is that division, which the student mentioned at the end of the description. Okay, this can almost be a minimalist painting in and of itself. So this is how the painting is set up. If you can describe how it's set up with a line down the middle, a crooked line down the middle, but almost perfectly down the middle. So that creates a division of space, one side and the other, left and right. And what you say about one side or the other is not in the realm of a formal description, but saying that there is a left and a right, and there's a line down the middle, and the left and the right are almost equally measured in space. That's part of the formal description. Any meaning to that comes later. After seeing how the painting is divided, okay, into halves, then we start looking at the two halves. On the right half, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and left half there are 1, 2 people. Okay. The student mentioned that the figures on the left versus the figures on the right are larger. The figures on the right are, so they're almost the same size, but this character on the left, definitely a larger person, okay, versus a thinner person. Someone with more presence and a dour look on their face and large hands, which we're not going to worry about the symbolism of large hands yet or any meaning, versus a faceless person with small hands. Faceless person, small hands. Person with a face, hands that are larger and or more articulated, or there's more detail there. So we can say that the light faces on the left have more detail to them, and the dark faces on the right have very little, if any, detail to them. You can go around. If you wanted to describe this, it's so tempting to get into the meaning of all the size differences, details differences, and the colors of the paint used. But to keep this within the formal description realm, you can describe that there is a table in the top right corner that is an oblong that is kind of angled top right, with a single figure seated behind the table, the furthest from the viewer, but facing the viewer. And there's a chair on the other side of the table, which is empty. The chair is very geometrically drawn and very simply drawn. Moving down the right side is a larger table. It seems like only half the table is sticking out from the center right of the painting, and there are 2 people at that table. The first person is on the opposite side of the table from the viewer, seated in a simple chair. The figure is wearing a green hat that rests a little bit crooked on the head, with the left side lower than the right side. There is a person at the end of the table, from our point of view to the left of the table, seated in profile in a simple chair, leaning slightly forward with an elbow on the table, with the right hand holding a fork. And the fork is simply rendered in red, and it hovers over a white sphere, which we assume is a plate. In the bottom right corner is a figure sitting over a table, on the opposite side of the table from the viewer. The figure has a green long sleeve shirt or jacket on. There is not much detail. The jacket just forms a rudimentary geometric shape. The figure appears to be reaching over a white circular plate and cutting into the plate. There is nothing that can be seen into which the figure is cutting. There's a glass to our right of the plate, rendered as a very small white tapered oblong with a black off-centered cross in the middle. Moving to the left bottom corner of the painting, there is another table, and you get the idea. There is some difference in texture. Some places where the paint is applied very uniformly, so there's not much perception of texture. And other places like the floor, where the paint is not mixed, but less uniform. So it creates this texture that is made by brush strokes. And same thing on the table surfaces. There are very strong, forceful brush strokes of brown over covering up white, which would probably be the ground of the canvas, to make a texture on the table that, while it doesn't look like wood grain, evokes a sense of wood grain. Okay, so there's a lot to go on there. Start with the larger compositional elements and go in detail by detail. We're not making assessments yet. We're not telling the story yet. Just describing what you see.